The first item I have on here today is freedom of the floor. We change this up once in a while, but I'd like a motion to offer freedom of the floor to Councillor Dumas. In particular, she will be interested in the item we referred from the Water Committee meeting here, as well as for Director Nain. And do we have any other visiting directors? I don't think so. So move Watson, second, and Popoff, freedom of the floor, all in favor. That is carried. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And we acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional territory we're meeting today. I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Hannah Graf, Popoff, moved to seconded, all in favor. Anything late items from staff? I haven't heard any. All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Receipt of minutes. The minutes did go to board. Any issues we had have been ironed out. I don't think we had any last month. So they are received. So delegations, we have delegations for two of the items, 7.1 and 7.2. So we'll move to item 7.1. Under planning and building, we have a development variance permit application. Landowners are Knox and Johnson. We have Kevin Johnson here in the gallery. If you want to come up and join us, please, at the table. So this is a staff recommendation is to approve a development variance permit application. I guess we'll start with Sadie. Give us the Coles notes, please. What this is all about, and then we'll move to the delegation. Go ahead.
Thank you. So this is a development variance permit application to reduce two setbacks in electoral area F. Typically, the setbacks in the front property line are 4.5 meters, and from interior side lot lines, it's 2.5 meters. Kevin is requesting to reduce the front property setback to 0 meters and the side to 1.9 meters in order to be able to build a two-car carport with a little storage area. The reduction of the setback in this case is required due to the topography of the site. I think it's page 7 and 8 of the report. You can kind of see it slopes quite quickly down towards Kootenay Lake from Johnstone Road. The construction of this carport will allow the applicant to park off the road right of way and will also make access to the neighboring property safer because they sort of have a shared driveway there. And given this information and that there's been no opposition to the proposal from neighbors or other agencies, staff are recommending that the boards approve this DVP.
Great, thank you. And so, Mr. Johnson, did you want to add anything that we wouldn't have already seen in the report?
Well,
comments?
Bit of history. So this was first occupied as a cabin in 1928, and the house we live in today was actually built 1938. They used that existing cabin built 1928 as one corner for the building of the house that we live in. So the place has been there a very long time. So that was originally boat access, but with the lot only being 100 feet wide, it is unable to get any driveway down to the house. The Johnstone Road wasn't built until 1953. So anyhow, what we're at here is we have about 74 stairs. So there's literally 50 vertical feet between where we park and the house, which has worked to this point, but it's just the reality of having storage for, endless bicycles, skis, you name it, all that kind of stuff literally has to be carried up and down the stairs. So this is going to make it a lot more easier going forward here to have some storage at our vehicles rather than having to rely on storage somehow in there in the house, which again on that slope is kind of cost prohibitive.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee for the applicant? I have one that will end up maybe going to staff as well. In the application, it's a carport, but it has a little bit of a walled area, as you say, for storage to be a bit of a protection.
Right.
So my concern is down the road. This is a setback variance. It doesn't say for a carport. It doesn't say for a second residence, an accessory dwelling. It just says it's a setback variance, which would allow a structure to be built there pretty much on the edge of the road. So it's a carport. If somebody in the winter slid and hit the structure and hit another car, so what? If it became a accessory dwelling cabin because you close it in 5 years from now, that's different. Having a house right on the road. So what I'm going to be asking staff is, should we be, whether it happens now or when we come to the building permit stage, should there be some restriction that this variance is only for the permitted use of a open area carport with a limited walled in or enclosed area, as opposed to just a structure that can be set at the edge of the road? Have you had any conversations about the future of this structure, what it might become, or what it should not become?
No, I think it would be pretty prohibitive in the fact that just simple as septic. There's no room, that kind of slope and just the square footage for any kind of septic system for a consideration like that.
And
But that's not any of our consideration, but again, we're only the owners at the present, so yeah, that's an interesting point looking down the road, but.
yeah, technology might allow many different things down the road. So that was my only concern, was it doesn't say what it is. Director Watson, Chair Watson.
Yeah, thank you. Through to staff or the proponent. Is there, I don't see anything in the referral regarding the act in terms of Minister of Transportation. I would assume Johnston Road is a Mott road. And how does that work?
Yeah,
Sadie,
through
yes.
the chair, the Ministry of Transportation has already reviewed this application. They had to grant them a permit as well in order to place it in the encroach into their setback as well. So they've already authorized it, and then they saw this referral again and had no concerns about it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Interestingly, Ministry of Transportation granted a permit to build the foundation of a house on Armstrong Road in Area 8 into the right of way at one time. It's revocable, which means that sometime in the future they can say demolish that corner of the house. However, yeah, it's not unusual, I guess, on a little quiet side road. Any other questions for the applicant before we move to the staff recommendation? Not seeing any, nobody online. Thanks very much. If you wouldn't mind returning to the gallery, we'll go to the staff recommendation. So discussion and or Director Newell.
Move the recommendation that's in the agenda that is
Second.
for approval.
Hanegraaff, second discussion. So, sure, I don't know if you want to respond to my earlier point about what if somebody thinks this should be as mandated by Bill 44, a second house on the property? Is that a building permit thing? Is that something you're building now?
Through the chair, we already have a good tool for regulating that. So because the property is so small, they're not allowed to have a detached accessory dwelling unit. So if they did want to convert this in the future in order to be issued a building permit to do it legally, they would have to come back to the RDCK and say, hey, we're applying for a bylaw amendment in order to permit a detached dwelling instead of just a secondary suite in the home.
So the most it could become is a garage, maybe fully enclosed, which is still really meeting the intent, just costs more money. So maybe that's not why that's being contemplated right now. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the application on the setback variance, any opposed? So that is carried. That will go to the board tomorrow as is. And thanks again, Mr. Johnson, for coming in. We will go to item 7.2. This is a subdivision in the ALR, Lansing. We have the applicant online, Frank Lansing, joining us from afar. This is electoral area K in lower Arrow Lake near Burton. And we have, again, Sadie as the Coles notes for us. So to Mr. Lansing, because we couldn't really discuss this earlier, at this point, Sadie will give us the Coles notes, a bit of a summary on what the application is. We would ask you to add any information as just in the previous delegation. And then when we're completed questions and answers, then if you would meet from that point on, we'll go into our debate on the recommendation. Sadie, let you give us a summary.
So this is an application to realign the boundary between two parcels that are both partially within the ALR and electoral area K on the west side of Lower Arrow Lake near Burton. The applicant is pursuing this application in order so that the second parcel can also have a portion of the property abutting the lake. Staff are recommending that the board support this application and advance it to the Agricultural Land Commission. The proposal doesn't appear to have any negative impact to agriculture. The proposal maintains large parcel sizes, maintains farming potential, doesn't add any further fragmentation of agricultural land, and it'll also meet the zoning's minimum lot size requirements.
Thank you. So Mr. Lansing, did you want to add any information or if you're willing, reply to questions from the directors, please go ahead. You're muted right now. Frank, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, just first of all, thanks for our consideration. Thanks to the staff as well. They've been very supportive and helpful. Don't really have anything to add. The details that Sadie have provided pretty much cover it off in terms of what we're trying to achieve there with that property. It simply meets 3 requirements that we want to try to achieve for it, which is like a standalone property with waterfront access. The road into this area is a forestry road, which is at best seasonal. This would provide more access. Doesn't change densification and brings it within the conformance of the RDCK AG3 zoning for a minimum parcel size. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It will make it more marketable and potential for a future sale if we so choose to do that.
Great, thank you. Any questions of the applicant from the committee members? Not seeing it. Oh, go ahead, Director Weatherhead.
No, I'll just say hello, Frank.
Okay, fair enough.
It's not empty.
Okay, so thank you. If you wouldn't mind muting now, Mr. Lansing, we will go to the staff recommendation, which is to support the application for the proposed subdivision. Director Weatherhead?
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm in full support of this
You're moving.
proposal, so I will move it.
Okay, moved and seconded. Cunningham, discussion. Seeing none, fairly unusual, but yeah, landlocked parcel, pretty much.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I wonder how these come to be in the first place, these odd little lots that are landlocked like this.
Through the chair, bad historical
Bad.
facts. Maybe not an intention to have the idea of more flexibility for use in the future.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can do better.
yeah.
No.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the, all in favor, so any opposed? So again, that is carried, that goes to the board meeting tomorrow, and they have the final decision, which includes us. Thanks very much for zooming in. I didn't ask what time of day it is in Italy right now, but you're ready for supper probably.
6 p.m. Yeah, ready for dinner.
There we go.
And a
Okay.
glass of wine.
Glass of wine. Okay, you can send ours by Uber Eats, I guess. Thank you very much.
Take care. Ciao.
Thank you. So we will move to item 7.3. This is for information. Planning Services Quarterly Report. Any questions for staff on that? I see Director Graham, please go ahead.
Thank you. So through the chair to staff, on page 3, there is, under RDCK, there's a zoning bylaw review for the RDKB, Electoral Area C and Christina Lake. So I find that unusual, and I was wondering why we would be reviewing a zoning bylaw for another regional district.
Anybody? Nelson, please go ahead.
No, Chair Jackman, it's not uncommon for us to respond to other local governments when they send us a referral on changes they're making. As a common courtesy when it's land abutting our regional district and for them to invite comment on those sorts of changes. So it could be a single application we've seen, or if it's a whole scale update of an OCP, we've seen those come to us as well on referral.
Supplemental, Director Graham? No, I'm just wondering, is it, you say it's not uncommon, I hope it wouldn't tie up a sizable percentage of staff time to look at something outside of our RD, or any idea?
Not
Or is it
usually,
an
no.
hour here, an hour there?
It's probably more common for us to say no concerns
No
or
interest.
interest unaffected.
Okay, thank you. Chair Watson.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to staff, I'm wondering with the subdivision applications, I think can we not include what area those are for? Because I don't know names just off the top of my head. It'd be helpful to see those because subdivision referrals we don't get referred to them as directors. We only get the final. And I do get questions. I had one that went through and I said I'd never seen anything and then the approval came through.
CEO,
So through the chair, the file number shows the area at the end of it. So the first one's I, second one's K, H South, D, B. So Gluckman is area D, conventional 3 lot. So whatever that last letter is the area that it's in.
So supplemental to that?
yes, we're learning code.
It's
Not
good to-
computer code. Go ahead.
It's good to know that, and I know this is on just board, it's not on subdivisions, but I really hope when we do the review of subdivisions that we can, as directors, actually see them as applications and provide input on them. Not just the final, it was approved. Modi thinks we have input on them as directors. So I don't know which one this one is, but I will look it up.
Okay, any further questions, comments on that report? Vandenberg, go ahead.
Just on, and maybe I'm wrong, page 4, at the bottom line, subdivision referrals, it suggests there's a total of 35, but the numbers don't add up. Am I reading that wrong?
I don't have it in front of me, I can double check those numbers. It was what?
10. And
It
so,
should be 10 and it says 35.
Yours is different than mine.
Oh, that is a summary of application referrals.
is this?
It's the next
It's
page
on
down is
page-
35.
He's
Oh,
on page
Page
4.
5.
Oh, and you're on page 4. Oh,
Yep.
yeah, this is
Yeah,
35.
sorry, I'm on page 5.
Yeah, you said.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's the last page.
So a typo or an error in the spreadsheet or something between
Yeah,
one page
spreadsheet
to the
formula
next.
didn't work out well.
Okay.
What's the
It's just a simple, that field is.
Oh,
The page before is good. Okay, so Nelson will chase that down and fix the math. We will apply AI, ask it to determine whether or not there's an error in this matrix of whatever. No further questions on that report. We'll move then to 7.4. For information, but I'm sure there'll be some conversation, compliance with Bill 44. So Sangeeta, you have some slides, a bit of a presentation. Carly, do you have those to put up? Okay. The floor is yours.
So while we're doing this presentation, we're trying to align our OCPs with SMA. That's the project that we have approval to go forward with. And
Yeah, we have public here and online. So small housing.
small, yes, thank you, small, and remember what it.
Small
Thank you,
scale multi-unit.
Housing.
Okay,
So we're just looking at the zoning bylaw changes that were made in 2024 under Bill 44. So that was the first amount of change or level of changes that we did. And we wanted this opportunity just to clarify some of that information and what these changes were and how they affect development in zoned areas of the RDCK. So there's the outline of the presentation. Starting with the background, Bill 44, the next slide, please. It is in the fall of 2023, Bill 44 was passed. This bill required local governments to update their zoning bylaw to allow an additional unit, such as a secondary suite or detached accessory dwelling in zones restricted to only a single family dwelling. To comply with Bill 44, local zoning bylaws were required to be updated by June, and official community plans are pending on December 31st, 2025. So in June and July of 2024, the RDCK board adopted the list there of zoning bylaws. So this just gives you a timeline of what that project was. Our approach on how the amendments were proposed and adopted. So in zones restricted to having only a single family dwelling, Bill 44 introduced that one secondary suite or detached accessory unit would need to be permitted in residential zones The province did not dictate how to do this, but recommended that only secondary suites, not accessory dwellings, be permitted on properties less than 1 hectare in size where not serviced by a sewer system operated by local government. Other important considerations we took in our approach is the board's strategic plan, planning expertise, and local knowledge, First Nations directors, RDCK departments, and then the small scale multi-unit housing provincial policy manual. So what was required is that we needed, next slide, required is what we needed is to allow 1 secondary suite or an ADU in all restricted zones. What was optional, and we list that here, is direct density above 2 dwelling units to be achieved through subdivision or bylaw amendments. So for example, one of the things that's been raised is the replacement of site area for lot area to determine density. Modernized terminology and definitions, for example, 1 family dwelling and single family dwelling were replaced to be single detached housing. Align zoning bylaws to be more consistent. So across the various zoning bylaws we have in place. So the definition of single detached housing was updated as well to be the same in all zones. And modified the height, story, and size permissions and parking space requirements for ADUs being accessory dwelling units, and in some cases, provide the allowance of ADUs where they were not previously permitted. And actually, they weren't permitted in several zones within the older versions of the zoning bylaw. For example, in Area A, R1 and R2 zones allowed for accessory dwelling units under the previous zoning bylaw, but R3 and R4 zones did not. So there was inconsistency there. We saw that throughout our zoning bylaws, which is why we are looking at making these changes to be more consistent. So next slide. This is just to highlight how the board's strategic plan is aligned with our decision-making or our recommendations that we give to you for decision to simplify land use planning by respecting our unique challenges to ensure our ability to provide water and other infrastructure is maintained, to support and encourage housing initiatives where servicing and amenities can support densification. So next slide. With the RDCK board's strategic plan in mind, staff looked for opportunities to arise from Bill 44 to make the land use planning language simpler and more consistent across the zoning bylaws, which also is considering how community development is sustainable and safe for current residents in the future. In the box, you can see and the diagrams, you can see what the approach was to the amendments to allow single detached in 1 hectare lot dwelling or duplex or a secondary suite, depending on the lot size. Similar to the bottom one, you see 1 hectare size lot allows single detached dwelling or secondary suite with a maximum density of 2 dwelling units on the lot. In addition to these changes, other amendments such as definitions, general use regulations, density provisions, and non-residential zones were proposed. Next slide. So this is just to explain how we went through the public process. Even though the timeline was tight, we did squeeze in some opportunity to consult with our public as well as our agencies that support our work. So our referral package was created detailing staff's recommended approach to implementing Bill 44. The referral package included all the information listed here. So an overview of the proposed amendments, a map, concurrence tables, and amending bylaws. They were sent to First Nations, RDCK departments, directors, APHCs, and Creston Valley Agricultural Advisory Commission, other agencies, and Mont. And in the box, we note that we did send these to property owners, a mail out that had 3 or more addresses on the lot, just to notify them. So, and also a notice was placed in the local newspaper, that these proposed bylaw amendments were being considered. And you will note that we'd have to do it in 2 consecutive, newspapers. So the next slide is an excerpt from the report that was written by Dana Hawkins explaining why we changed the density provisions in the zoning bylaw that are being, discussed by a couple of directors here. So adding a detached, so the density previously noted that adding a detached accessory dwelling unit added uncertainty in the interpretation of density. In most zones, a minimum site area was used, meaning multiple principal uses were permitted if the lot size were greater than the site area. So in the country residential zone, for example, a site area could be 1 hectare and would permit 1 single detached, or 1 hectare, sorry, I might be reading this quickly, 1 single detached house or a 1 hectare lot. I won't read it in full, but 2 hectares allowed for 2, and so on and so on. And that was based on site area, if you read that. Then it was unclear how density for an accessory dwelling unit would be calculated in that current scheme that was in place previously. Therefore, staff recommended introducing a maximum density and minimum lot size to single detached and duplex residential zones. So again, looking at our 2 zone, the proposed maximum density is 2 dwelling units. This could be a single detached house and a secondary suite, single detached house, and an ADU or duplex, but no more than 2 dwellings are allowed, no matter the lot size. The minimum lot size is 1 hectare, so again, new lots must be at least 1 hectare in size when subdivided. So reasonable density is not lessened, rather a subdivision would be required to maximize density instead of multiple dwellings being built on a lot. This is preferable option to staff due to the servicing review that takes place at the time of subdivision, ensuring enough potable water and sustainable sewerage disposal with backup area is present on site. So next slide. And if anybody has any questions as I'm going through these, please stop me.
Well, there are questions, but we will wait to go through the
Okay.
presentation, I think, otherwise we're not gonna get to where we need to go.
Okay,
Yeah, please carry on.
so then, the next slide, density without subdivision. It's important development important development outcomes may or may not be achieved with this approach. Development can potentially occur without appropriate servicing considerations, which can result in decisions that cost the community in the long run by inadvertently damaging ecosystems, increasing exposure to natural and health hazards, and creating emergency response challenges. Density with subdivision, important development outcomes can be achieved with this approach, as aspects such as sufficient water, septic capacity, and access must be demonstrated prior to subdivision. And also subdivision approval ultimately rests with the approving officer at lot, but the RDC plays a key role in shaping possible subdivision via our subdivision servicing bylaw, which can set standards for things like access, parkland dedication, and works and services, so water and sewer requirements. Then density with bylaw amendments. So these are options for people, when I say this, under the current zoning, where site area has been removed and lot is in place, people have the option to subdivide their lot, and therefore we would ensure that the lot and the servicing requirements for the lot and the multiple dwellings was addressed. So each dwelling could, or each lot could have 2 dwellings depending on the size of the lot. Accessory dwelling units, and it could be a secondary suite for a detached dwelling. or they can go through an amendment to the zoning. So that's still open to people to do if they want to densify further. So important development outcomes can be achieved through a bylaw amendment approach, which would ensure sufficient water and septic capacity and access would be required. This approach is flexible, meaning the board can also not request that these additional requirements be demonstrated. For example, a group of shared interest property owners could apply to increase the permitted density on a lot to 5 units. This can be approved without subdivision by the board. So the board would have options to offer residents through a bylaw amendment. Next slide. Density concerns. When density is added through the subdivision process, it ensures that important development objectives can be achieved. At the time of subdivision, a lot cannot be created unless there is proof that there is enough water and septic capacity to support the subdivision. The proposal also needs to meet lots' access requirements. Ultimately, this ensures the minimum standard for long-term sustainability of the lots by allocating enough area for current and future development without welcoming negative, immediate, or cumulative impacts. When higher density is permitted outright, these objectives may not be met. For lots with on-site servicing, there is no oversight for septic capacity and potable water other than in the building permit stage when a septic filing is confirmed. This only confirms the septic capacity for the proposed construction and not future development, and relies on the professional reliance model to demonstrate this. There is no oversight to ensure that development will have adequate potable water and that it is not negatively impacting neighboring parcels. Adequate access is not required. In addition, the development of lots with multiple dwellings may not be located on the lot to support future subdivision if required, negatively impacting landowners who may wish to seek that option in the future. Next slide. So post-adoption public feedback, since we've implemented Bill 44, we've had about approximately 60 subdivision referrals. Staff have not received any bylaw amendment applications to increase the number of dwelling units to 3 or more dwellings on lots where this was previously permitted. At the front counter, most of the feedback received on these amendments has been positive, particularly regarding the allowance of ADUs on residential lots over 1 hectare. Staff have also received several inquiries on how to get permission for an ADU on a lot where only a secondary suite is currently permitted. These would be generally for 1 hectare, less than 1 hectare size lots. There have only been a handful of residents expressing concern over the change in approach to density for applicable large lots. So we just threw in some options here. So proceed to required OCP consultation process for Bill 44. Sorry, next slide. Changes including aligning zoning and OCP with 2024 adopted changes, as well as other projects like updating OCPs. So we've put the pros and cons there to provide you some clarity on that option. And then option 2 would be to prepare amendments to the zoning bylaw, which consider density via use site area rather than through a subdivision or bylaw amendment. And then we've added some pros and cons there. So moving forward, slide. Staff are seeking RAC direction on the following options, option 1 and 2. And staff note that if different electoral areas choose different approaches, it could lead to inconsistencies, but that's more of a statement that we wanted to just make clear. I also wanted to let you know that previously in R1 and R2 zones in area A, you could have ADUs permitted in R1 and 2 zones. But we weren't allowed in area A in the previous zoning bylaw to have ADUs, accessory dwelling units, in R3 and 4 zones, which were larger lots. Similarly, that was the case for area D. We saw that consistently throughout our zoning bylaws, which was our rationale for why it needed to change. Those zoning bylaws were written at the time and they were written with site-specific requirements. But my concern here is during the building permit stage, we do not require proof of water except to ensure that there is a water access, like water available. And the building inspector just ensures the hookup is there, same with septic. So the rope registers their wastewater plan for the property with IHA. We know that those are never looked at, so it really is professional reliance on those. And so depending on what kind of water access they have, if they are using wells and septics, we have no way to address that potential contamination if it is well water from the septic. So partially our concern, the building officials and the building permit is not the place to ensure that servicing requirements are met on a property. It really would be through a zoning amendment, which was presented in one of the slides, or through subdivision, ensuring the long-term sustainability of the lot. So that's all I have to say about it.
Okay, we'll go to questions, comments. So I have myself, Watson, Davidoff, Newell right now. Normally I'd wait. I'm gonna go first with just one of my points. You mentioned Area A twice. Area A didn't have ability or wording around accessory dwelling units for R3 and R4 because very clearly, looking at this is it, because it was plural in R3 and R4, dwellings as a principal use, you were always allowed to have more than one dwelling. That's why it didn't have a definition as an accessory, because say in the shared interest, the three landowners could have three principal dwellings because that's how it's defined in both R3 and R4. That followed through every change to Area A and tried to understand the problem when the province said you had to create an accessory dwelling definition and go into Lidstone's conversations about how what's principal and what's accessory, they're at loggerheads. So you created an accessory definition, you stripped the plurality out of the principal use, which I think is wrong, especially for shared interest. So it's a half measure approach that was optional. It needs to go to community as an OCP review and the fulsome conversation around this that we should have had before June 2024. We removed the plurality of principal use from large lots and replaced it with a singular principal use dwelling and the accessory, and then you went and moved to the capping of 2. These are big conversations you hold with community. At some point, we might ask Lidstone about his definition of principal use versus accessory use. I think it's problematic that we've now added the accessory use as a second dwelling. Because what if there's a request for a third and a fourth dwelling, as you say, through variance request, and guys like Lidstone come and say, well, now the accessory uses exceed the principal use, exceed the singular dwelling principal use in R3 and R4. We're putting ourselves in a worse position, in my view, because we didn't have this conversation. I'm not a planner, but I can observe possibly down the road where it's not more simple. And OCP review would be the time to do all of this. I have other points to raise, but you raised Area A and R3 and R4 twice. I just want to go to the speakers list. Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is information that staff have given me, and why I raised Area A is because it's the top one. In R1 and R2 zones, 1 hectare was the density provision.
Yep.
And yes, depending on lot size and servicing, you were allowed to have another dwelling unit. However, R3 and R4 zones, 2 hectare lots, you weren't allowed to have an accessory dwelling unit under the previous zoning bylaw. So what we did is we are allowing accessory dwelling units in all the R1 to R4 lots what we're saying is we're changing the site area, which would define density, to lot, which allows for people to have one accessory dwelling unit on a lot. So that was the only change we made. How you want to proceed with it is up to you, but that's why I raised area 8.
So your words were, in R3 and R4, you were not allowed to have an accessory
Under the
dwelling.
previous zoning bylaw.
Under the previous zoning, it wasn't defined as an accessory dwelling. It wasn't necessary because you were allowed multiple principal use dwellings. That's why it wasn't accessory. That comes to the Lidstone argument about principal versus accessory use. The definition, the words accessory dwelling didn't exist in R3 and R4 because you had a plurality of principal use of dwellings, plural. It's right here, circled. I've gone over it numerous times. We've stripped the plurality of the principal use and now created a new accessory use, which down the road will create a problem with the third, the fourth, the fifth dwelling. We need to have this as a backroom conversation, but it's a very fundamental change to what's permitted on those lots. And that is my biggest single concern. All these ideas might be great, and when community discusses them and OCP reviews, they might say, yeah, this is the direction we need to go as community, and sanction them. That's down the road. I do have Watson, Davidoff, and Newell. Apologies, I needed to emphasize that because I heard 2 and 3 times something that doesn't jive with what I read on the paper, and Vandenberg's added to the list. Watson, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm first gonna go to our engagement process because that's where my first concerns arise. And I wanna note that we were very limited based on what the province wanted from us. We're doing this backwards. It should not be do the zoning, don't really do robust engagement, and then do OCP and do robust engagement. That just doesn't fly. That's not your fault. What does concern me in terms of what we did in public engagement is, to me, it doesn't say that because we didn't get a lot of responses, it was all good. I know we didn't get a lot of responses because the public didn't understand it. My APHC likely didn't meet quorum, so they don't know what it was. It was only in the OCP referral where they did meet quorum, where they asked a bunch of questions, and what was presented to them, again, not our fault, but we speak a different language than the general public can understand. They had no idea what it was. They were just going to oppose it because they simply didn't understand it. It was the first meeting I had attended to try and help people. And as I walked them through it, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. So there's a transparency issue in our communication that is, it's LGA, it's the LGA language we have to use, but we can't assume engagement was fulsome when we know this is not well understood. How many meetings has it taken us to be like, what are we doing? What is this? So the other compounding factor to that is that when we centralized public engagement we didn't even have a public hearing on that one, let alone one central public hearing for all areas that were changing. That it's absent of the community actually being engaged. So that's why you don't get responses. They don't really get it and they don't understand it anyway. So like, whatever. So the engagement process for me is the first error where I would not consider it fulsome, nor would I say that that's a good metric to assume the public actually responded and because they didn't, it felt good. The second one is that when we have a year's worth of information regarding people reaching out to us to see if they can make a change, it's also not a good metric. A year worth of time is not a good time it's not a sufficient amount of time to say it looks to be fine because we haven't heard from people that they want to change it. Now I want to reference the subdivision aspect of being that's the preferred model. I just sent an email to planning noting the subdivision referrals that are going through that because of our current bylaw, we don't get comment on them. I have 3 where when water stewardship branch or whoever is approving a water access point or a POD, whatever that is, they're not assessing actual availability of water. There's still a major gap. So there was a subdivision in Meadow Creek for 3 lots where that aquifer has been seasonal droughts for 3 years in a row now. We don't own any systems there, so it's not on our radar. Whoever's approving the permits for, you could drill a well there, isn't actually assessing the aquifer. And I know the community's like, there's actually not enough water for more. It's not being flagged anywhere. So I don't see subdivision as catching those things. I also have homes that have been given permits on unmaintained right-of-ways that are being blocked. Because Modi, I don't know why Modi approves them, but FSR subdivisions, water access only subdivisions, subdivision is not capturing the ideal aspects that we need captured to say we're doing this appropriately. So subdivision for me is not dealing with, sorry, your suggestion or what's in there currently, that subdivision is the route you take if you want to add more homes to a large lot, does not capture the servicing requirements. It's being missed, and that's, again, not our departments. I do know when you get a building permit, and while we're not the ones investigating, what is your system and does it meet all these things, IHA is over the top assessing that. They cannot contaminate. I know that they cannot, because I hear from people saying it's impossible for me to put a septic in here. It's impossible for me to put a water system in here, because it is captured there. So, and I'll also add that when you mention Area D being one of the ones that had those large lots, you could have a lot. The only Area D zone community is Ainsworth Town Site. You don't have large lots on Ainsworth Town Site. You have very, very limited geographical ability. So for all those reasons, I would say that the approach that we took on this, and again, largely because of what the province required of us, did not meet the public engagement that I would expect, nor do I think was transparent. That's not your fault. That's what the province required of us. But to say that, we did what we needed to do and the public's fine with it based on that, I would disagree with. Affordable housing. If we are really looking at affordable housing and you're dealing with rural areas where I have 30-acre lots or 50-acre lots, that's actually how people are affording housing, is the ability to share land as such. And subdivision is not always possible depending on what they're doing, but they have, you can get legal agreements on use, so they can figure out how to do that and afford it. So I think without zoning, it's really hard for me, because the only one that does have zoning is Ainsworth, and geography limits what they can do. But moving forward, I would not support this when I do get into zoning, and it would be very interesting because the public engagement is the piece I'm so anxious for in my region, in my area. To see their feedback. They did not know what this was. And it's hard to translate that when the APHC doesn't even know the metric for it.
Thoughts on that, Sangeeta, or do you want to move through the speakers?
Yeah, I just picked up on the word error around the consultation, and you made it clear that it was what we were required to do within a short timeline. So it wasn't an error on staff's part on the engagement piece. I just want to clarify that. For the record, we did what we were required to do to achieve Bill 44 amendments. Yes, all those changes and the zoning bylaw amendments are complex for the layperson to understand. So that we acknowledge, and I'm not sure if your APHC had quorum or not. We can revisit that and have that conversation. But at the end of the day, subdivision is, or a zoning amendment to a lot, is the way, as staff, we recommend growth occur on lots that can accommodate as many dwellings as possible, in order to ensure that you're looking at the whole lot when you're developing it. You're not just looking at the siting, which is what the building permit does, just the siting of the house. That's where geotech is required. That's where they will ask for water and ask for septic. And again, that's provided by a wastewater practitioner, that septic report, and it's filed with IHA. IHA doesn't look at them. And the water, nobody's looking at like the availability of water in any of the creeks that we know. We have some water monitoring going on right now, and that's going to give us some data over time. But generally, a person can show a water license as proof of water under our subdivision bylaw, but under a building permit, they don't even have to provide that. They just need to provide us with the pipe to hook up, which the building and plumbing official will make sure that the attachment is adequately put under the code. The other piece on that one is also the water itself. We register a covenant on properties to ensure that the property owner is responsible for water potability. So we don't ensure potability. We say through the covenant that you're responsible for it. So that means they have to have in-house filtration or UV to ensure that in the building permit stage. And at the end, we're not here to convince you, we're just here to tell everybody what happened and let everybody make their decision on how they want to go forward. Our recommendation is that site area is an inappropriate use of the word to define how density happens on a lot. It's should be lot. You can use both. You can use both. One won't be as controlled. We're currently going through our subdivision bylaw review process, and that's gonna help Mott get more tighter on those requirements to ensure lots are developed in a good way. And a lot of our electoral areas, also, my other thing was parkland dedication. If you have multiple houses on a large lot and you don't have that subdivision process, you can't get parkland dedication for the densification. And it's very rare that it would happen, but it's likely it could cause an issue in that regard as well. So I'll start there.
Supplemental, please.
Sure. We're gonna go a little ways on this, I guess. Go ahead, succinct as you can.
I just wanna, a couple of things. I specifically articulated, I wasn't blaming staff for the public engagement, but you are using metrics that suggest we met it in your presentation that I would disagree with. So you know it was not well done because we couldn't do it well. Fine, don't say that because we haven't had responses, we're good. That's the gap I'm noting. We need to change how we do that. Even when the province forces us, we can tell the province, we need time to do this. Sorry, what are you gonna do? So that's what I would do. I disagree on the subdivision aspect. I won't be convinced otherwise at this time until I have zoning in place and until I can have a comment on subdivision. Even we have water monitoring in area D that is not used because it's outside of our offices. It's not within our data. And so there is subdivisions being approved where there is not water. I don't care about potability of water. I didn't talk about that. I talked about actual water flowing. That's what I was concerned with. We're running out of water. And if it's not zoned and it's not our water system, no one's catching it. So I want subdivision referrals when we do that bylaw. If there is no director involvement in those referrals, I will still be in the same position I'm in right now. Those things are being missed because they're not in our servicing. And I appreciate that you reminded us of parkland dedication. I'll just note that the one subdivision that was approved, one of them that is a developer that's managing the road, because Mott's fine with that, not only limits access to those properties, but he never met the parkland dedication because the way he did it. And frankly, that would not be a reason for me to say, yeah, let's go subdivision instead of actually making lots affordable that are very large. That would not be a metric for me to do that. So I'm happy that you can, give me your opinion. I'm going based on what is working and not working. And perhaps when we get zoning and things will change.
Okay, we should move through our list a little bit. We may loop back on stuff. So I have Davidoff, Newell, Vandenberg. Haven't seen any other hands right now. I didn't finish my list. Director Davidoff, please go ahead.
Yeah, Chair, before I begin, I just want to point out that the two previous speakers, both chairs, spoke for 15 minutes combined. So I hope I'm not limited to 2 minutes of time.
Noted. And I was noting the time for myself and the previous speaker.
Thank you, because I have a lot to say about this topic.
Yeah, staff spoke in between as well, and there were supplementals, but go ahead, please.
Thank you. So I agree with what Director Jackman said about confusion when it comes to previous language and current language. In Area I, we had, in 1996, we brought in what we called cluster housing, where you could have multiple principal residences on one property, one house for every 10 acres of land. And that was in certain zones. Our previous director took advantage of that and has 3 principal residences on that one property. I have a neighbor who has a 50-acre parcel, and they're allowed 5 principal residences, and right now they have 2 at the bottom of the mountain, just right, not far from my house, and they are they have 2 principal residences on a 50-acre parcel of land. We we have our OCP, new OCP. We have some residents who have huge acreages, 200 acres, that are concerned that they no longer can do that. They no longer can place multiple principal residences on large parcels. So I also agree with what Chair Watson has pointed out. I am confused. I'm getting asked a lot of questions, and here are the questions that I'm being asked. Questions like, the BC government has now allowing us to put secondary dwellings, all these things to increase the amount of housing that we have. So my neighbor has a property just under a hectare, and he's asking me, he says, Andy, he says, can I put a carriage house on my property? And I go, well, I'm not sure. You're under a hectare. You're on a creek that's fully committed. We have 71 licenses and 43 properties. Their water branch is not allowing any more water licenses. There was a way that you could split an irrigation license and to do something additional. So that still, I think, exists. But it says, I'm not sure. I have another neighbor who wants to convert a really large shop into a residence. But again, the property is under 1 hectare. And they're asking me, can we convert this shop into a residence? Could be beautiful. Then I have residents in Wyken subdivision who are looking at doing an accessory building, but with the second floor getting ready for a carriage house on lots that are like postage size. So you got a huge septic issue. There's no community septic. Then I have Sure Acres, where we delayed our official community plan for like a year because we did a drastic assessment of 70 wells because we were worried about densification would put pressure on the aquifer where you have really shallow wells, 30 feet. And the ratings are public, the report's public, and almost all those wells rated poorly in terms of vulnerability. So, but then I have residents of Sure Acres contacting me saying, I want to put in a secondary residence. I want to add a carriage house. I want to do X, Y, and Z. And I says, Andy, what's the answer? I says, I'm not sure. And what I'm hearing today is staff has made it clear, and I'm not blaming anybody for this. I think I am going to blame somebody for this. The provincial government has created something which works in a municipality with full servicing, but really gums up the work for us in the electoral areas in a big way. And that's what we are. We're a rural affairs committee. So we're trying to wrestle with what staff just said. Well, we don't have to prove water. Chair Watson spoke about, hold on a sec, like we've got a drought alerts, like there should be nothing being built there without a proof of water. But we don't require that. That's an IH thing. But now it's professional reliance. So we don't have to worry about septic. We don't have to worry about water. You can go ahead and do stuff. Our building permit department will issue a permit as long as there is a pipe there to connect to water, regardless. And then we file a covenant on the property title to say, okay, well, you didn't go and split your water license, but it's okay. You got a pipe there. You can hook up your secondary residence because you're over a hectare. So, and then in Otishenya, we allowed a duplex on a half acre of land. But by getting in that application, what happened, the reason we allowed was because the Otishenya Improvement District allowed a second connection on a property, but that's a duplex on a half acre lot with septage for a duplex, which is supposed to be on a 1 hectare lot. And in Otishenya, everybody's on a half acre lot with septage, their own septage. So you can understand, like what Chair Watson said. It's even the consultation process. We went through one in our OCP process since 2016, and we got it done. Just got it done. But this stuff here, I think what the province is trying to do is good, because they're trying to increase availability of housing, and in municipal environments it works well. For us, we almost need a series of FAQs where my lot is under a hectare. I live in blah, blah, blah. What can I do? I mean, it's not the legalese that we need, is that we need FAQs that answer questions. And we need those as directors, because only thing I can ever say is you need to talk to the planning department. I can't answer your question because I'm not sure. And so I just refer everybody to the planning department. And I don't feel so bad now by doing that, because I saw the summary of applications and referrals in Area I. Since January, we've had 2 of that whole list. We've only had 2 matters that the RDCK office is dealing with: a subdivision referral and a Crown land referral. Out of 111, we've got 2. So I don't feel bad referring all these people to the planning department. And we've only got 111 for the whole year so far, because those summaries were not included on page 5. But if you do the summaries, you can see where it's really busy. Area B's got 13, Area A's got A, you get it. So bottom line is, we need FAQs to help us. We need FAQs to help our constituents. And staff is not to blame for any of this, because it's the provincial government that did this. And then we knee-jerked it as fast as we could to be in compliance with the legislation. So I want to ask staff through the chair, is what I'm saying making any sense or not?
Comments or feedback from staff? There's a whole range of big lot, small lot issues there.
Yeah, through the chair, there was a lot there, Director Davidoff, but I can just say that your approach to sending people to us is a good idea, to have that conversation about what densification they can have on their lots. We will discuss the FAQ. That's not a bad idea, maybe giving people an idea of how to interpret our zoning and make it much more clearer. I don't know if we did that during the OCP review for Area I, but we can look into that. Just to clarify one thing that you did say. So for lots that are less than a hectare, they can have an accessory dwelling unit. Where lots are less than 1 hectare and they are serviced through a community water system, densification is allowed. And in those instances, it's the water purveyor that is referred to for that water system. So for example, if it was our water system, we would be the water purveyor. But in this case, it was Otishenya. Just wanted to say that when you mentioned that, it was for a area that has community water servicing. And Shore Acres is a complex area. It's very complex, and densification there is an example of what it could be in other areas if we allowed it, meaning you could impact aquifers, you could impact, you know, water quality, and well, as a result of that, it's, you know, it could be worse, I guess.
Supplemental, Chair.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for that. Now, we have another complication. In Area I, we have over 100 water systems, points of diversion, and Amy mentioned what's a POD, those are points of diversion. We have 1,200 surface water systems in the RDCK. We have 100 in Area I. And only 5 of them would be considered community systems. The systems that I'm on has 71 licenses on 43 properties, that's irrigation and domestic. We are not considered a community water system. We're not organized. We have one person that filed a document to get IH off our back. And this is the person who kind of takes care of the system. But we are not a community water system, and there's none of us would dare approve that there's additional water because we don't have that right. The controller of water rights has made it clear that on our system, and probably on all the systems that we have, no further water licenses will be allowed. And given the drought conditions, the only way to prove water is by drilling a well. Then you got something that you can rely on. But that's another variable that we're dealing with right now, is that we're community in quotation marks and not legally. And the other thing that's really happening, that's troubling right now, is I have people come to me and say, you're the regional district director. My mortgage broker in Ontario is asking for a certificate of potable water before I can get my really low rate mortgage. Where do I get that in our system here? I says, doesn't exist. So the only way we deal through it, our lawyers and notaries in our area are doing title insurance to try and address that issue. But one day that title insurance is not going to be enough. And when certificates of potable water are going to be required on 1,200 surface water systems, of which maybe 50 are treated and organized and are really community systems legally, how do we deal with that? So I'm going to stop there. Chair, thank you for your indulgence of time.
Yeah, and I do know, and that's a future thing. It says community water, like in bylaw 1675 under Paul R1s, it says community water, and we've never defined that. But that's a separate conversation.
It is defined.
Defined. We've never had the province understand what a community is versus their arbitrary definition of community water. They think they define community water. We know what our communities consider to be community water. We have tons of shared water systems, hundreds of probably more than one residential shared water system that we never finished the small water, the micro and the nano water system conversation through UBC. We never finished that conversation as to what's truly a shared water system. Separate conversation, but that's we just left hanging there. You do want to go to Director Newell if we go.
Just wanted to say it through the chair. The concern there is I used to have a water license on a creek. It got blown out by a debris flood after a wildfire.
Yeah.
And we all lost access to water.
Yeah.
And but some of us put in wells, some of us went into the lake. Those things can happen. Those are events that occur for water systems, and that was a community water system. But it wasn't an IHA approved community water system.
Yeah.
Like Odishanya, or like our water services that we support. So I want to make that distinction.
Yep,
And
I
so
think
when
we
we talk
understand.
about community water and sewer, it's really about that IHA approved system.
And the province left us hanging to recognize the real systems like you're talking about that are used by community. They left us hanging. Small, micro, nano, conversation never got to where it should be, to properly define what in reality water systems are. And they're all vulnerable. We talked about this in Director Cunningham's area yesterday. They're all vulnerable. Gar Creek, all vulnerable. But that's not the conversation. I think what Director Davidoff is pointing out is that we've never had recognition of community water systems in reality, and they're not IHA approved ones. IHA approved ones, many of them don't meet the regulation. Go on their website. They'll show you, red circled ones that are not doing what they're supposed to do. That label doesn't mean anything to me. It just means that there are systems that got a flag with their community, and yet they're still not in compliance, not by a long shot. Go to East Shore, I'll point out a few of them. Apologies, too much editorialization, but Director Davidoff brings up a great point about we use the word community water. And that's very limiting for a lot of our small clusters of housing because they're not recognized as community water, even though they may be as good a water as the one a few kilometers away. It is recognized, and so they can densify. There's a different rights based on level of recognition, which is not equitable. Never has. I do need to go to Director Davidoff.
Yeah, thanks. And conversation has highlighted the complexity of the issue. And I will say that I am kind of struggling technically about what the real difference between option 1 and 2 is. But I would like to ask a question, if I may, and then maybe make a comment. So part of Area F, Sangita, has 1 acre lots. And in support of subdivision, of which the last RAC meeting or the previous RAC meeting, we talked about subdivision. Someone wanted to subdivide because it was so much more beneficial to subdivide than to add a housing unit to a current property, which then makes the new property unmarketable and what have you. So we're in support of subdivision in some cases. Can a 2 acre property in an area that is zoned for 1 acre, R1 or R2, subdivide into 2 1 acre lots currently?
And
Through the chair. Obviously, we're having a conversation here.
Probably not if they don't have adequate servicing to support the 2 lots. So you need enough site area for a secondary field. Even if it is a type 2 system, you need enough site area. And most of these lots, like I know several lots in Area F that are maxed out in their development. They have accessory dwelling units. These are historical grandfathered things. Plus they have accessory buildings on the site, and there's an old septic there. Maybe there's a type 2 field available, but maybe not. And many cases, I personally know that they don't have that capacity. Those lots are not sustainable. And I would say, yeah, it's really to answer your question, it's about on-site servicing.
On-site servicing, yeah, and it's a
Support that
specific lot
subdivision of the 2 lots, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. So I just wanted to maybe use that example as I may explore it in more detail, the complexity of subdivision, because we had one with 4 hectares, 2 hectares, and they weren't allowed to subdivide into 2, 1, and almost 1 hectare, and then whatever. So it's a subdivision is a challenge, and densification is a challenge. So I wanted to highlight that. But speaking kind of in support of subdivision, I see the value of it, but the complexity of it. I'd like to say that we learned from someone that wanted to subdivide rather than build the secondary unit on their property. that building a secondary unit brings with it problems that people do not want to engage in. One is being a landlord. And one, like in my neighborhood, you know, there's some nice houses, some average houses, but some properties are not selling. Any ones that are, you know, quite nice house and maybe, you know, over $1 million or whatever, they're not selling. And the moment you put the second unit on there, you're adding $400,000 to the assessed value of the property. And all of a sudden you have an unmarketable property or very difficult to market property. So subdivision then becomes very advantageous. So I'll make those two kind of editorial comments. And definitely the growth and densification is becoming a real challenge because of water availability. More and more wells are struggling and what have you. And so those are points well taken as we try and move forward with densification. So I'll leave it at that. It's kind of in support of subdivision as a densification process, but not sure it's how it can work in area F because there's not that many big lots left. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Director. Sangeeta, some thoughts on that?
So through the chair, Director Watson brought up a lot that she said went through subdivision. I'll have to look into that in Meadow Creek. But water availability is the concern for our region. As a growth mechanism for our region, we need to think about it. We're dealing with drought conditions in many areas. Our subdivision process is the better process to ensure there is water available for each dwelling unit on the site, regardless of the size of the lot or any of that. Really, that's the mechanism to ensure that, or do a zoning amendment so that we can, as planning, go through the process and leave the decision to you as to whether or not we would allow a third or fourth dwelling on a lot based on what the landowner can tell us about servicing provisions. But at the end of the day, I just have to say that with densification in the rural areas being governed by Bill 44, one of the limitations, and I've talked to my colleagues around the province in rural areas, is that servicing provision and the water being the biggest one. I'm repeating myself on that, only to say it's not only our problem, we're seeing it across the province. So Bill 44 was intended to allow for more density. It has a few problems with it, but I don't think those problems will be alleviated if we leave it up to the landowner to determine what their servicing provisions are and allow them to have as many dwellings on their property without that oversight from planning or from the approving officer. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, sir.
We'll go to Director Vandenberg and then maybe have a break. Vandenberg, go ahead.
Great,
Weather
thank
ahead.
you, through the chair. I'd just start off by suggesting that I do agree with Chair Watson, upfront subdivision application, notification, and engagement with directors. I think it's very wise. That needs to happen. And I do like the idea from David off, the FAQs. That would solve a lot of situations for me as well. But my question is more of a comment, and it came from our Crescent Valley Ag Advisory Group. And they were, like the APHC, it was kind of beyond their understanding. We did spend some time, City did a great job of spending some time to dissect it down into its elements for the Ag Advisory Group. At the end, the interesting comments that came forward was they really seemed to be in support of the maximum as proposed for agricultural land, but they didn't want to comment on non-agricultural land, which then suggested there is two conversations here. And are the provisions able to discern the importance of the difference between ag lands and non-ag lands? In their estimation on non-ag lands, you should be able to maximize through appropriate order, subdivision, and having the resources there more than what the other proposed wording was. So I would throw that out there because we haven't heard anything about agricultural versus non-agricultural lands. And as they seem to be just lumped together, and maybe there needs to be a division. So I just wanted to share that as the comments came forward with that group and put that on the table.
So through the chair, I might want to get Sadie to respond to this because she was at that meeting. But the CVAC is specifically looking at agricultural land, so that's why they did not comment on the residential. And I'll let Sadie speak to what was said at that meeting.
Yeah,
Clarify.
through the chair, typically CVAC only focuses on agricultural aspects. That's really their focus. And what I've heard, because I have been working with CVAC for a couple of years now, is that they're really looking at limiting residential impact on ag lands. In the Creston Valley, that's like their biggest concern. That's what they're hearing from other farmers. And so one of the real benefits of this, the way that this outcome has occurred, and actually what was happening before, but is generally that on agricultural land, you're not getting that extra permission for a detached dwelling unit. So your accessory dwelling unit is not permitted. You get a second unit, but only as the secondary suite. What that does is it limits the residential footprint more into that one dwelling. You're not getting a second detached building. And as Tom kind of brought up, that can add quite to the cost of the land per acre per hectare, which can limit future farming activities. So for CVAC, the concern has always been, we don't want to allow that additional dwelling unit. And these changes did not allow that. They kept it to the secondary suite. And something they did note, I think it wasn't in this meeting, but a previous meeting, was that by having other properties, so residential lots where they do allow that detached ADU, that actually creates sort of like a draw for people to not purchase agricultural land if they're not wanting to farm, because they're going to get greater permissions on residential lots. I don't think it came up in that meeting, but CVAC did indicate that they were supportive of detached ADUs on residential lots over a hectare, just so long as that wasn't metered for ag lots, which it wasn't and continues to not.
Further, Director?
No, I just thought it was important to ensure that that communication was put forward on this table.
Great, an interesting point, to get people to buy the non-farm, to have the mortgage helper, the second house. Director Main?
Yeah, thank you. As a municipal director, it's been really interesting to overhear this conversation. I have a few observations to make. One of the things that we do not talk about, because it is outside of our lane as local government, is that the housing push that we're seeing nationally is in response to an exploding population on the planet, that we're running out of community land for people to live on. So they're going, okay, we'll go a little bit more rural. We're going a little bit more rural. And that's how all of our communities started. It was like one settler and then another few. This is something that we are going to have to grapple with as human beings at some point. Water. Both staff and directors have brought up the fact that we are increasing use of diminishing water reserves. And that's something that, again, we have to grapple with and figure out different ways of dealing with. The generational housing challenges are part of that whole bigger picture. I have a child who has been unable to purchase land because of A, it's not available at any kind of affordable cost, and B, things are getting a little bit more crowded in the rural areas, and he wants to be more rural. He doesn't want to live in town. He's fortunate that he is able to find a situation that suits his needs, but boy, it was a long, hard journey to do that. A few directors have raised the issue of their engagement language, and this is something that I've been harping on as long as I've been on RDCK, we cannot use jargon when we talk to our constituents. They don't get it. They feel put off by it. We have to change our language. It's fine if we want to use acronyms and jargon within our conversations, but not when we're talking with the people who elect us. Agricultural land versus non-agricultural land. I'm really glad that Director Vandenberg brought that up. This whole discussion has been really interesting because I have to attend the council meeting tonight where we are making a ruling on a development permit application within the village for somebody to build a secondary suite on their property. And so this is very timely for me, and I thank all of the directors and staff who have participated in the discussion because it has opened my eyes to the whole set and setting of how and why we make these determinations. Thank you.
Thanks, Director. Attorney, go ahead and then maybe we'll stand up and stretch our legs.
Hi, Chair. The latest email I received from Rashad, to provide comment from Area B on Bill 44. I mentioned to him that on our last APHC meeting, we didn't have any staff support, and it did come down to, I wasn't able to provide the information that people wanted, and that we recommended that we review it again this month. Will we be getting that staff person to help us out, like say you help the ag group?
Through the chair, I was just going away that date, so sorry for not coming to that. But yeah, as long as there's enough advance notice, we can always get a staff person there if it's requested.
Okay, that's last Wednesday of the month.
Lock it in.
Thanks.
Not going away to Italy or anywhere that, no, never mind. Sorry for this visitor. We should stretch our legs for more than a couple of minutes. And then I'm hoping, like for area A, I have 3 clean points in direction, which I think I made before, but I'm gonna make it a little bit like, but we can have a break, and then if somebody wants to provide direction between the required and the optional that's on this slide, then we should do that if we're able. If we're not able, we'll go to the next slide. So when do you want to come back? 7 minutes? Come back at 10:35. Is that okay? Stretch legs longer than 7 minutes? 7 minutes, 10:35. He wants to get the beverages and park. Clearly not.
Cunningham, right?
Okay, for everybody online, we're calling back to order at 10:36. If everyone in the room, it'll be difficult to hear with the conversation. Hello, we're back in session. Everybody in the room, please stop talking. I don't want to name anybody. Staff.
Start naming names.
It's not a difficult thing to catch out of the side of your ear that when we said 35 past, that I will intend to go back to order that time and everybody to become orderly. Thanks very much. So I'm hoping we will maybe give some direction to staff. There's options. We have a chart which said what is required under Bill 44, that thing, and what's optional. And Director Popoff, you raised your hand. Do we have either direction for staff or how we're gonna move forward? The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm not one to provide direction to staff or to anybody. I don't have zoning in Area H. And after listening to all the challenges that we have, I can maybe relate to my residents why they don't want zoning in Area H. But the challenge here is when you look at Bill 44, it's geared for bigger municipalities rather than rural areas. It's a challenge for rural areas to try to work within the confines of Bill 44. You know, it was brought up at FCM. The problem with densification is servicing in rural areas. Water and septage are the biggest problems. When you meant community water systems, yes, you're on a community water system, you're allowed to subdivide if you're not in the ALR. But have you checked with that community water system where they have the capacity to service that additional lot that you're going to create? Many problems here, and I will stop at that. I will, just a comment that I felt that I have to make.
You don't need to give direction to staff, I guess. Your zoning was not directly impacted. Because you don't have it. Any direction to staff from any of the directors on where we want to go from here. We have a deadline, maybe I should ask, was that deadline extended? December 31st? Maybe to Sangita?
There, I don't think we
Or
have
go
an
ahead.
answer yet on that. I think we've reached out to the province, but haven't heard that we have a deadline extension or anything.
No, it's not, it is.
So there was, like, to the minister, not minister, I guess deputy minister, ADM, there was a formal request to extend this.
Yeah, through the chair, there's been an email sent and we're waiting to hear back.
Okay. I think maybe as a follow-up, depending on what comes out of this, you might send another email saying, haven't heard from you yet, but guess what? We'll get back to you by March 31st, 2026. So there's maybe no surprises. If the ministry's not taking this seriously, that's one way to deal with it. Just tell them, you haven't answered our email and we got a lot of work to do. Say again.
Through the chair, they're on strike right now, with maybe the reason for the delay.
Deputy ministers are not on strike,
We
House is in
would have
session.
communicated to a deputy minister,
Okay.
we would have gone to a staff person.
ADM or do you know who?
No, not even an ADM. I'm not sure. I'll have to check into probably one of the staff at the Ministry of.
Okay. Could you put this to the board chair separately and we'll talk about if we want to communicate more directly?
Sure, you have David off and then I'll go on the left.
Okay, so sure, Director Davidoff, any direction for staff for implications of coming out of these options?
Yeah, I really appreciate the discussion we had because this is what we used to do at RAC quite a bit. And we had like fulsome conversations, fleshing stuff out. I think we've identified a whole bunch of complexity. We've also identified unintended consequences, I believe, when the province brought in Bill 44 for rural areas. Director Popov mentioned the FCM piece that, you know, that the consensus is very clear that in rural areas, like this is not a one size fit all at all. It's not even a one size fit all amongst our disparate 11 electoral areas, because some have zoning, like we're fully zoned in area I, and other places are not fully zoned or not zoned. So I think staff, the direction I would give or respectfully request the staff to think about what we talked about, maybe come up with some FAQs that could help all of us understand this a little bit better. And then maybe come up with some suggestions as to, you know, like, what do we do here? Because neither of those recommendations right now, like, kind of are things that I wouldn't support either one, because of the uncertainty. I think I'm going to stop there. Is that enough direction? Maybe staff could respond through the chair. Can you work on this and maybe come back to our next RAC meeting with
Yep, Sangeeta, you mentioned FAQs earlier, better communication.
Yes, through the chair, we can look at doing that. And as far as the options are concerned, if some of the electoral areas decide that they want to reverse the lot to site area again, so allowing densification to happen on a lot based on the site area being covered, and that way it would allow potentially multiple dwellings on a lot. If they want us to do that, then we can proceed with that added to our work plan. The OCP amendments required under Bill 44 are mandated to be completed by December 31st. We have tried to seek whether or not we can get an extension. I read some UVCM briefer about SMA and the small scale multi-housing unit legislation, and that the province will not allow people not to proceed with those changes. So I don't know what that means, but we can definitely look into an extension, see what that produces.
Okay, thank you. We have Hudson next.
Yeah, thank you. So moving forward, as the slide is called, Ainsworth Town Site's the only one with zoning at this time. So in terms of the actual impacts, I don't support subdivision being the way that we allow development on lots. I want zoning. I want zoning to be really specific to what we can do, and I know it can be. So at this time, I would be going for option 2. And as such, my OCP updates, I don't know how those align with those or not, because those have not been approved yet. So I'd be looking for option 2, prepare amendments that would consider density via use site area rather than a subdivision or bylaw amendment. And then once we see the subdivision bylaw updated and there's zoning in place, I might be more comfortable with subdivision being the tool. So that's where I would go. That being said, sorry, my question or my consideration is that because it's only Ainsworth Town Site, this is not affecting large lots. But I want it noted that as we move into zoning, I would not replicate what's currently in there at that state. I would actually want those large lots in the area that could very much deal with affordable housing to be amenable to do so. And again, until subdivision actually addresses a lot of those issues and we have more consideration, subdivision isn't cutting it.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to let Director Watson know that in the Ainsworth Town Site, based on Sadie's analysis, there's only one lot that would be allowed to continue to build multiple dwellings. But keep in mind, it's also within a geohazard area.
Yeah.
So when a building inspector goes there, they look at the siting of the property.
Yes.
The building, sorry, rather than the whole lot. Just as.
So then my supplemental question is that right now, this is not affecting Area D where I see concerns, but as we move into the zoning project, whenever that occurs, I'm gonna not want to replicate this current setting in the club. So just note that, I guess, is what I would say. I wouldn't want this to apply to Meadow Creek. I wouldn't want this to apply to where we actually have large lots and they're developable. Blah, 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 you know what I mean?
But if you apply this now to your OCP, it will apply to your zoning when zoning comes in, would it not? If you do an OCP change now, it will apply, it will govern the zoning in the future. Is that not the case?
So through the chair, currently it's only for Ainsworth town site. When we do an OCP review, the public consultation process will identify where zoning is needed and they may not want it up in Meadow Creek, Poplar Creek area.
I think
just want it, and I think Director Watson has made that point that she wants it in more densified areas. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay, just Area D has not asked for an OCP review. What we've asked for is zoning in specific communities. What I want to know is that when we get to that, the zoning that applies to Ainsworth, which would be this at this time, is not what's replicated in the other zoned areas unless the residents say yes. My big thing is the residents haven't really been able to talk about this, and that's where I'm trying to gauge how I know people are trying to address affordable housing. And then the second supplemental to that is it is indicated right now that if my OCP is updated with this as the framework, that then would inform zoning moving forward. So that's where I'd be having to catch it.
So through the chair, the process would identify what densification is allowed on residential. So a lots, when we go to do your zoning bylaw, we won't be using Ainsworth and replicating it because Ainsworth is a different situation. They have water, I believe, community water system in most of Ainsworth, or portion of it, some of it, and then so it allows for more densification and smaller lots there versus maybe in other areas. So we'd have to look at it for the area, not replicate things. We don't do that. That's been the issue in the past and caused problems. So we're trying to be more analytical in our approach and trying to apply as much data to the decision or informing the decision making with APHCs and community and directors.
So there's still an outstanding question. When the OCP comes forward for approval based on what we've already done with the zoning under the Bill 44, given that I don't want this to replicate unless my communities, when they do the zoning, want it, is that a contradiction? Can I reverse that? Or should I be not approving the OCP approval based on this?
If you've directed us, if I understand you correctly, if you've directed us to replace lot size with site area for densification in area D, specifically in Ainsworth, then the OCP would reflect that when we go to do the OCP amendment. But maybe Sadie can clarify.
Yeah, through the chair as well. I think part of the issue is that you have a different sort of language that should be occurring in OCPs versus zoning bylaws, where the OCP is setting out sort of like the vision and the goals. That language can be more broad and ensuring that that language is not regulatory. So what we saw in our old bylaws, which is a really good practice, was saying, we're gonna allow one use per hectare. That's a zoning regulation. In OCP, the language should be more broad, where you're getting at that idea, but not actually saying it in the regulatory way. So identifying more in an OCP, this is envisioned as being a low density residential area or a high density residential area. If you leave those two disconnected, your broader goals in your OCP can accommodate additional zoning. Like if you wanted to add new zones. So like if you look at the bylaw 1675, we have 15 residential zones, whereas you only have 3 in Ainsworth, and that's because there's a bit more complexity. They wanted to add that in. So an OCP, if you keep the language broad enough, could accommodate additional zones that maybe you're not seeing in Ainsworth, but you would see in Meadow Creek.
Thank you. I think
That makes sense.
it's just that the OCP amendments are forthcoming, and when my APHC reviewed them and we went through this, I could not track. I totally understand the difference between the OCP and the zoning. So I wasn't super concerned because it's guiding, it's not regulatory, but now it's also because we're doing it backwards.
Do the OCP changes to area D not have the number 2 as in the limit of residential? Overly specific, like you said, should not have? Aren't they in there now with what Rishab has done?
Through the chair, yeah, and I think that's something that's worth looking at. So
Okay.
because the Rishab's changes for the OCP were to be as directly, like make as little changes as possible from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things. But there is really a better approach, which is being less specific and saying that low density, high density, which would provide more flexibility, which is something that we can look at if the board wants to direct, and like not just making those straight up changes, but making it make more sense for flexibility.
So I've only analyzed A, B, C, and D in detail because of the similarity as a comprehensive land use bylaw. And the changes, as I read, will entrench the 2-house cap in the OCP, which will determine the eventual zoning conversation without revisiting the OCP. That has been my concern. One of my concerns is very specific, and it is entrenching the concept of maximum number where we didn't previously have that. So I do think you have an area of concern, and I haven't looked at all the others. I've tried to compare $1675 OCPs. That's complicated. So I haven't done it, but you guys should do it. Director Weatherhead.
Through the chair, I think, when I'm looking at option 1 and option 2, and listening to, of course, all of these, unique situations everywhere, I have a hard time landing on one or the other based on where option 2 is, risking that long-term sustainability on, around water and septic. Those are my biggest concerns in Area K already, because we have subdivisions that should never have come to fruition in the first place because there's no aquifer study. They're likely sharing aquifers. Some people aren't getting any water. Some people are losing their water, and that's just in one area. And they have water shortages all across Area K as a result. So I want to make sure that anything moving forward does not repeat this history. Once again, where there was no having to show water and or even provision for septic, because again, when something happened prior to those bylaws in Area K, in the same subdivision, one subdivision I'm thinking of in mind, already I'm concerned about septic contamination in relation to all of these wells that are dug in this one area. It's just kind of, I haven't even, I've talked with Sadie about it, and that's about it, because I'm kind of like scratching my head on how to help these people. So I can't sit well with option 2 and option 1. I would like those FAQs. I'd like to see a little bit more done before we have to make a decision. Thank you.
Was there anyone else in chat? Maybe I'll go right now. So we had, and I appreciate this slide deck, which I would have loved to see in March, April of 2024. So there's required and optional. Required. Allow 1 secondary suite or ADU, accessory dwelling unit, in all, in quotation, restricted zones. In Area A, R3 and R4 were not restricted to 1 residential unit. They never were, so nothing had to be changed in those zones. They were not restricted areas. In Area A, R2 already had the definition of accessory dwelling unit and all the good words about being able to have septic and water and stuff like that. So accessory dwelling unit was never restricted in R2 for Area A. And exactly the same for B, C, and D, I believe. There were no restricted areas for zones R2, R3, R4. The only area that would have needed, and I think you guys dealt with it cleanly, was R1, suburban residential. And those have always had the community water or no community water, which is problematic in another way. And then your lot size, your minimum lot size and density is based on that. So the way I look at it, Bill 44 did not require any changes to Area A's comprehensive land use bylaw because we didn't have restricted zones in that sense, except maybe R1 needed some language cleanup. Now, there were other definitions and words and stuff. We're not supposed to call anything a family home or whatever, I guess anymore. Whatever, that's housekeeping. So in Area A, the simple solution, because it is a comprehensive land use bylaw, both zoning and OCP amendments can be made, is we just go back to the old words in Area A for R2, R3, and R4. Because those old words did not restrict the second dwelling. And maybe if everyone else looked at their documents more closely, you'd also find that there was no requirement under Bill 44 to make any changes except perhaps to scrutinize R1. And if it's dealt as a suite in the house, yeah, that sounds like a very good way to go about it. So my direction remains for Area A to just go back to the words we had. It's pretty simple because the words are still in the word processor somewhere. If not, I haven't saved them on my computer.
Director Jackman,
Yeah.
Chair Jackman, can we just respond to that quickly?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that like you are right, that there was I think in the R1, R2, R3, R4, it allowed a duplex. And so in
Yep.
that sense, even on a smaller lot, you could have that suite. I think what, I look at if we move forward with reverting, is there are properties in the R3, R4 zone where, because the minimum site area, because the minimum site area is 2 hectares, they didn't have a lot of flexibility in what they could do. So they would have to have a 4-hectare parcel in order to have that second detached dwelling. Whereas there are quite a few properties now where they're allowed to have a separate detached dwelling, which would be taken away. And so I think there are some people now who have more flexibility than they had before. That might just be a conversation that we can have after, because when we look at actually, well, how do we, like going back straight and reverting might not make the most sense, but looking a little bit more nuanced into how we accommodate the permission for accessory dwelling units on those lots under a certain hectare amount.
I do understand, because historically we've grandfathered or allowed people to designate zoning, which doesn't make sense. I emailed some examples before where one thing's R3, it should be R4. However, all of that aside, maybe you only need as you revert them to add that you can have the secondary suite if you don't have that lot size. Until we actually have done the subdivision bylaw update, which I'm really crossing my fingers, will give us very good guidance for people to make, I think what Director Newell was referring to, an educated decision is the best path long-term for their land use and enjoyment. Without arbitrarily restricting it without full community consultation, the subdivision bylaw may come out to be a more simple, straightforward, understandable approach, which covers all the consultation we need. And people might say, yeah, I'm going to go that path, even though it might cost $10,000 or $20,000 more, 30, 50,000, depending on surveying and environmental stuff. But that subdivision bylaw will not only give guidance, I think, to people making individual land choices, it'll give guidance to if you're going to try and build a second or third house for future subdivision, which would be really smart to think about the cluster thing versus the subdividable future. So that's good. So it's a good point. If we need to say R3, R4 can have a secondary suite, do that. But I don't think we should have done what we did without going to community fully and explaining what we're doing. Your ideas might be the best practice, as I've heard, and the best outcome, but community hasn't seen it. And we're just beginning to see it.
You have David off on that.
Sure, Director Dave Dog. Is there anyone else sort of with direction to staff for the first time? Have you made any decisions or waiting for more information? And supposedly we're supposed to have this done in, October 15th? We're supposed to have this done before people go away for Christmas. No other first time comments in Edinburgh?
Just that my direction to staff would be, I need to have more time to decide, perhaps with Sadie. You brought up the subdivision bylaw, the future subdivision bylaw. In my mind, it should make a difference. I don't know. But I would need to know. I would like to feel a little bit more. The FAQs is really a big piece for me, and that's the ALR versus non-ALR that I had tabled. And I would like to understand the nuances around the option pros and cons that are kind of a, give me an example of, so I can picture it in my mind and make sure that it resonates. But the density concerns portion of the presentation, I have some blank areas there, and would like to have that better understood before I can really give you any further concrete direction.
Okay, we'll go back to Davidoff for a second time on sort of direction and then move to the next item. Go ahead, Director Davidoff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I was just thinking about the FAQs and what I think would help me and my constituents is answering this question. What development rights does Bill 44 provide me if my property is zoned X, and then just each list the properties? So is Bill 40, what is Bill 44? What development rights, additional development rights has Bill 44 provided me if my property is zoned, you know, what, and just go through the zonings. And then we could see, and it may be nothing, or it may be, here's what you could do. So then first thing is, here's what Bill 44 additional development rights it gives you in rural, in electoral areas, and then by zoning. I think that would help shape the FAQs and help us understand, because each thing is conditional upon the zoning for those of us that have zoning. And then it might address Director Vanderberg's question as well, is that you know, like, and then you can answer those questions with the density pieces, and then Director Watson's is like, what, you know, how will this impact future zoning, stuff like that. But I mean, we got to apply the, you know, make it as simple as possible. So just a suggestion. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so I don't see any other input on this not so straightforward issue. We have quite a bit of other work to do. We also have people on the line from a couple other departments or in the room to deal with the next item. So we're going to go to Environmental Services 8.1. Community Wood Smoke Reduction Program update. Nancy provided the report, but not available. But Emma is online still, I believe. You could give us a bit of a, is she still there?
Yeah.
Bit of an update on where we are with what I think was a very successful program that we're no longer eligible for. Emma, if you can give us the Coles notes where we're at.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good morning, everyone. The purpose of this report was to provide the committee with an update on the recent changes to the eligibility criteria for the Community Wood Smoke Reduction Program. The goal of this program was to encourage public to change out old smoky wood stoves for cleaner heating options, and has been facilitated and financially supported by the Ministry of Environment and Parks in partnership with the BC Lung Foundation since 2008-2009. Unfortunately, due to a new eligibility focus on red zone communities and First Nation communities only for the coming year, the RDCK no longer qualifies for funding, and therefore the program will be discontinued, and all stakeholders will be notified. Thank you.
And you mentioned the red zone, and I looked at the maps. I know over time, Crescent Valley had a big push for a particulate matter station, whether it was 2.5 or 1.0. I think push, pull, the Fed said, nope, we're not funding it. So we don't even know if we're red zones due to lack of monitoring. but we know historically we were red zone in some areas. So I see Director Cunningham, Vandenberg, Watson. Go ahead, please.
Traditionally, Weimar is a small town in the Tech Valley. And when I arrived way back in the sixties, every winter you couldn't see 2 blocks because of the wood smoke as well. Because it was held down because of the conversions and things like that. And it was really, really bad. The wood, and of course the other thing is that we had no other option other than, I mean, you could heat with electricity, which is pricey, was pricey, really pricey at the time. And most of the houses were old, so they didn't have that option because they weren't even wired for 220 volts or whatever, let alone 100 or 200 amps. Forget that. We're talking about 30 and 60 volt wiring. I mean, amp wiring in old houses. And so the smoke just billowed out. The wood stove exchange program was a good thing. The other thing, of course, is we didn't have the option of natural gas there. We still don't have the option. And like a lot of the areas of Central County, we don't have the natural gas option, which was a cleaner option. So the wood stove exchange program was welcome, and it did help I'd say some. But I'll tell you, the real saving grace now, of course, is the heat pump program, which gives rebates. And it has certainly cleared the air terrifically. And people now a lot of people, I'd say at least 50%, only now use their wood stoves for backup, rather than as a main fuel use. And that has certainly gone a long way. The trouble, of course, with the heat pump program is you have to have the wiring for it. In other words, you have to have, I heat my house, which is about 1,700 to 2,000 square feet, depending how you measure it, with a 20 amp circuit heat pump, and that does it to 25 below. And it's one of the new types that does give you runs 100% at 25 at minus 25. So and I said, well, what should I do? He says, just leave your old stuff in. He says, you never know. But he said, we've had no complaints, and he's right. When it went down to minus 25, that thing was producing its 100%, same as electric heat is 100%, like a regular. And anything over that was producing more than 100%. Most temperatures, like right now, is producing between 300% and 400%. It's dropped my power bill from probably $200 a month. It's dropped to buy, because I was paying at least $200 a month for electric heat back in those days. And of course, I'm using electric heating mainly because I can't go out and chop wood, and I don't want to pay the cost of getting wood nowadays, not to mention the inconvenience, the smoke, and everything else. The cost of wood heat has gone up terrifically. So those, when you're looking $300 or $400 a cord for anything half decent, not to mention you got to split it, bring it in, and it just on and on. I believe the heat pump is a far better option, and so I think that's probably that's a good thing. Now, what about the smoke? Well, I think the idea of I wish we still had the wood stove program, because I think there are still some of those who use it. Even if you're using wood heat as a backup, it helps if you've got an efficient stove. And maybe we should be given lessons somewhere along the line for people how to use it. Because believe me, I've got people across the way who bought a house that had a wood stove in it, and they certainly don't know how to use it. I mean, the wax is, forget it. What are you doing? It looks like the pictures of the Titanic with the black smoke pouring out the funnel. That's what they're so good. That's what it looks like every morning when they fire it up. They obviously don't know how to burn it properly, and they're probably not burning the right kind of wood properly. So I guess I've covered a lot of items in a very general way, but I'm just doing that to suggest a number. With the future, maybe we should be giving heat pump benefits, or at least to let people know, because that's clean and efficient and relatively economical. And then in my area, in Weimar, anywhere where people who are buying wood are paying $400 a cord for it, minimum. It's actually cheaper to heat with a heat pump than it is to actually burn wood. And of course, not to mention all the other benefits with regards to airship. Weimar should have been one of those red listed programs or areas with a triple red, because it was just terrible. And it could just go do that from time to time now, probably not much better. There it is in a nutshell.
And the CSLAC chair may put that on for a more specific update on education around heat pumps and where we're at with that program. I think it's under CSLAC or predominantly. Thanks. Nobody groaned at your clear the air bad joke of the day.
I did internally.
Internally, we all groaned silently. Director Vandenberg.
So noted on the heat pumps. So I am fairly new to the red zone communities and this program. I'm interested to know though, on page 10 of that report, or that presentation, how is that information collected by the Canadian Ambient Air Quality Standards reporting period over the last 10 years? How do they collect that information to know what it is, creating the benchmark to have this conversation is my first question.
That's to Emma, I guess, if you know.
She's unmuted.
Go ahead.
Through the chair, I'm not familiar in their data collection method. Unfortunately, I could look into that and provide more information afterwards.
The reason, if I may,
yes.
The reason I'm asking is, how do you determine a red zone community then? That seems to be the data used to do so. And it's fairly new to me, so I'm asking it because I don't know.
You need the particulate monitoring station, which they've been removing systematically from our rural areas. But
Right.
you need the officially sanctioned, I believe, Environment Canada sanctioned monitoring station, which comes at a cost.
So I guess maybe it doesn't really matter because it's fading out. But if it comes up in conversation, I'd like to know what it is I'm talking about.
So either Emma or Nancy could do follow-up, I guess, on that.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Emma.
I was just, I can follow up on that.
Thank you.
Sure, Watson.
Yeah, thanks. I had the same questions as Vandenberg, and then, I looked into it, and essentially when you don't have the monitoring stations, it's easy to say that you don't meet the criteria. So we don't have, it's also, from what I could find, the monitoring stations are not related to when, we just had Category 3 burns rescinded, which means we're going to see all the slash pile burning happening. And we do end up in some, especially in our valleys, some heavy smoke times when it also coincides with when we turn on our wood heat. What I want to raise about, so in that terms, I don't think that the categorization of the program is adequate in any way. So, but that's not a surprise. They also stopped monitoring water data. And so we've taken that on. Good for us. What I do want to note about the importance of this program is wood stoves are still an essential form of heat when you have no natural gas and you have higher than average power outages. Wood heat is an essential asset in most of the area I represent. Even in Caslow, I mean, we have had our power lines cleared more, so we had less outages, but climate tells us don't get comfortable. So while I'm not going to debate trying to get into this program, that's probably too much work and it's not going to get us anywhere. I do think I still need to consider how I can support this because it is important to use a good stove. You want to talk about the Wild West, you could go look at some of those wood stoves people are using and what do they call them? I'm not going to say, even if I remember because it's a bad name.
Killers.
There you go. They're horrible. And so it is one area where when we talk about the REAP program or any climate change programs, this is a critical tool for us, is being able to support people to get clean burning stoves that are as net neutral as possible. They're considered net neutral because it's trees. That's a different conversation. They are not net neutral when they're bad ones. So my questions are, when we initiated REAP, the Regional Energy Efficiency Program, we did include rebates in there that covered the utility areas that were not being adequately supported by those utilities. I'm wondering, as we've requested at CSLAC, and it goes to the board because it's a board-funded program now, I would like to also ask, can wood stove rebates be included in that program somehow? And if so, what would that cost? You don't have to answer me now because I know it's an external contract. And then the other one is I may just look at an Area D specific program, and my question is, can I grant to a nonprofit to provide these rebates, similar to the grid stability program?
It would be good to know how, maybe start with the data. Why did they, where do they monitor? How did the eligibility shift? And then if there's access some other way to the program.
Supplemental, I mean, if staff has time, they want to look into it, they can't. I don't think it's a worthy process to go down in terms of getting back into that program. I'm more curious about the immediate response we can have to it, which is, I guess I'm asking the CAO, and I think I know the answer already. Can I grant to a nonprofit to provide this program?
Yep, through the chair, it's under the generator conversation.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Great, no other, I think there's anyone else online?
Yeah.
Amber.
Oh, sorry. Dr. Vandenberg.
Yeah, just that conversation, and the potential opportunities, around the education. As a person who just finished building the house and went through the process of putting in a wood stove as a backup, to our slab heat, boiler, what I do know is the technology has changed a lot, and there's requirements that I had to follow and get certified and approved. So I think that there's that process that exists already. So I guess my caution would be is how far do you get into something that the building code is already providing protection on. And so I just wanted to add that comment to it. And I get that there's a lot of stoves that are out there and that sort of thing, but and I'm quite ignorant in it. You know, being a fairly new wood user, I love the heat. It puts me to sleep right away. That's probably a good thing. But certainly as a backup tool, it's why we decided to go that route. But I learned a lot about the whole science around it and why they've changed so much.
Second bad humor of the day, if you feel sleepy, do you have a carbon monoxide monitor in your home? As recommended by the building code, previous building manager. We didn't want to go maybe too far. You had a quick thought on this, we'll go on to the wall.
The wood stove exchange program often applied to people who were not dealing with building permits at the time. They were just wanting to update their wood stove, and that would not be triggered by a building permit process. So a lot of them are just, especially if they have an energy assessment done or something else, a permit's not always going to trigger those requirements. If you do need a permit, yes, you're going to wet certify all that kind of stuff. Insurance will trigger a wet certification. But a lot of these are also in areas where insurance and building code may not be what they're seeking, but they do want a better stove. So all the areas.
Okay. Chair, for the second time, Director Cunningham, then we'll go to.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a motion that we refer the item of possibly wood stove replacement funding to CSLAC as for a possible program in the future.
Sure. Yep. And Chair CSLAC is taking a note. So is it a motion or just a direction?
We're making a motion at the motion.
Well, it's a request to put an item on another committee agenda. Help?
Yeah, through the chair, motion would be most appropriate.
Motion works. Okay, moved, seconded.
It shows that this committee
to
taking the wood stove program
to move this item to the CSLAC agenda. Okay, so formally moved and seconded. Any conversation around that? All in favor? Okay. Captured. Thanks, Director. Okay, the next item, we have Chris here for this in person. The Water Services Committee report 8.2 was referred somewhat unusually to here. Just checking, Councillor Dumas is actively listening. So she was invited because she would be the one person missing from this conversation. I think fortuitously, Director Davidoff is finally listening to this conversation because he was previously not invited to the Water Committee, having no regional district systems, but many other systems. We have freedom of the floor already granted to Councillor Dumas. the one question would be, should we offer, Councillor Dumas a stipend for sitting in on this meeting? It's unusual in its business. She was not able to fulfill her role as appointed by the town of Creston on the Arrow Creek water system. She couldn't give her input at the previous meeting where she, did sit in and waited. Question I'll put out there, do we offer a stipend to Director Dumas for this meeting? Watson, so moved or not necessary?
I think you can move it. I move it, and I think there's another consideration. Can I go ahead with my other?
Yep,
Okay.
please.
The other consideration is that Water Services Committee met for 19 minutes. And I think aside from the chair who traveled there, I don't think we should be paying stipend for that committee attendance. Except for Dumas, who would be attending 2 meetings now to cover the difference. So that would be the other option would be, but if that gets too complicated,
Yeah, that'd be something to bring up maybe the next Water Services Committee meeting.
we would have been paid by then.
Well, okay. Just, however, on
Okay.
Director, on Councillor Dumas, moved and seconded, should be offered stipend. Any discussion around that? All in favor? So that stipend would come from rural.
Chair, yes.
Yeah.
Rural admin. Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? So that is carried. So, Chris, you had a report that we just got into the very beginning of. Page 127 and 195 on our agenda. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you again for referring this item to this committee and providing me the opportunity to present it to you and answer your questions. The report before you today provides an overview of the opportunities and challenges related to supporting non-RBCK water and wastewater systems. Provides an update on some of the recent requests for assistance that we've had. And also provides an overview of what the province is doing and what others are doing, including another regional district that have a somewhat similar program in place. I think the recommended approach balances practicality with our capacity and leverages the information and requests provided so far to inform our own of this. That said, I'm here to answer any questions that you might there.
Go ahead, Newell, please.
Can't remember now, where would the funds come from? Or would that be part of your report to us?
Through the chair, I haven't, through with the request, I have not asked for additional funds. We do fund our existing support through A103, I believe. 2025 budget had $54,000 in it, and that's included in section 4.1 of the report.
Yeah, supplemental.
Yes, good.
Just to be totally clear that this would not be in any way supported by the 17 or 18 water systems that we collect funds from.
Through the chair.
We're not running with there. So,
well,
Just through the chair, to the extent that they pay into rural admin, which is where the funds are coming from, then yes, they would.
okay.
The $54,000 comes from rural admin into A103 to support that.
Remember what I'm talking about?
Yep.
So
There's a similar model for fire services where a portion of the regional fire service budget stays in rural admin so that when the support for search and rescue groups or other entities that aren't part of the fire service need support, they are supported by the fire service as well. And that's paid by all rural taxpayers. But yes, we are
rural taxpayers,
yes.
Not water, not the 17, not out of the fees paid through the water service to run the water service.
Through the chair, not out of those fees specifically, but the only water service, the only residents that we serve with water that would not pay would be the town of Creston.
Okay, I have Watson and Graham. Go ahead, Watson, please.
Yeah, a couple notes on this one. I really do want us to do this. My first question is, and I'm sorry, Chris, I did read this and then I meant to reread it. Have fun with my memory but here. We created a small water system proposal 6 years ago, We took it to IHA, we took it to the small water group, the BC Water Systems, they were actually involved in it with water and wastewater systems. And we took it to the ministry several times, and essentially it was taking the infrastructure planning grant and proposing that the province not limit us to two, and that it be supplemented to look at things that are beyond just a planning, but included the governance and the type of system. So it was kind of a capacity building function so that small water systems could at least reach capacity. And then, you know, should they do that, they would then could be considered under acquisition if they wanted to. So I'm just curious if you've been able to review that, if that will be part of your consideration in some of the supports we could provide. And then I have another question, but I'll stop there and see.
Yeah, through the chair, certainly a comprehensive review of everything we've done in the past, small water systems, the whole micro system, talks with UBCM and the province would inform me in any new information or options that I provide.
Okay, so that was a board-led proposal that we put together. And if you don't have it, then CA Horn or I will have it. Second to that is that, you know, we've jumped back to the CSLAC conversation a few times. To me, this is sustainability. This is the stuff that's like critically, tangibly what we need to be dealing with in our region. So in terms of funding, I do think this would be one where under the sustainability model, again, not with current participants because it doesn't have enough people in it, but this to me is a sustainability measure. I'll also link it to when we approved the drought. I can't remember what it was about a month ago, and it was more under EDMA. I really wanted to see small water systems, not only watershed assessment. We seem to have gone watershed assessment while skipping the step of all the people that actually don't even have secure access. So I'd like those connected in some way. And I know that I know Tangi was a part of the Watershed Governance Initiative when she was in the water department. So I assume there's some connection there, but I don't want us to be siloing these conversations. It's all good to know what's happening on the ground, but when you can't do anything about it and you know people can't secure their water, that's a bit of a miss on our part. So I'm grateful we're looking at this. So essentially I support it. I'm happy to move the motion, but I wanted to add in those notes for consideration. Last note before I move the motion, unless you want to go to discussion or further discussion.
We have Director Graham, but you can move the motion or not.
Well, I'll make one more note and then I'll move the motion. The other note is that being at UBCM this year, I think in the electoral area forum, I know for myself, I've had a decade of trying to talk to the province about small water systems, and it's the same answer every time. Like it's horrendous, and I do appreciate when we send motions to UBCM, they can be supported by the whole body, and we get the same answer every time. Getting I don't know that lobbying is going to make a difference, but we can. It just blows me away that the province, after over a decade of just my time, not Jacqueline's time or when Shadrach was here, how much we've lobbied over not just the regulations and how inhibitive they are in a small community, but also the cost of the provisions. It's one of our biggest barriers to providing support. So stop ranting. I'll move the motion.
Do we have a second on the motion?
And it's the first one.
Tierney seconds. I do have a speakers list still. Anything to add, or are we going to?
I should stop. I'm good. Thanks.
That's good. We'll go, Director Graham, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. So through the chair, I like this too. But I'm gonna have to ask staff, is this really the right time to add another thing to the water services when we just removed the moratorium on bringing in more services and we don't even have an update on how that's going? So I'm just curious if this is really the right time to be doing this project. And I've also was doing some research to see what other supports there were for non-municipal water systems. And apparently there are a number of them that are already existing. So my second question would be like, are we integrating the Water BC, the BCWWA, the BC Small Water Systems Community Network, and the Mustang Survival Water Life Fund that all seem to be available to small water systems already?
Go ahead, and maybe first, we're gonna just clarify, there's a recommendation on the agenda. And that's further investigate expanded non-billable admin support and explore potential viability of billable program offering project management.
I
versus,
erred in looking at the report and went option one, thinking that was, I'm going with option two in the report, which is what's on the agenda.
what is on the agenda.
Yeah, my
is
apologies.
The intention to move
Yeah.
and second, and that is by the seconder, what is on the agenda. Dr. Tierney? Okay. Chris,
Through
go
the,
ahead.
through the chair, what's recommended is actually leveraging, those other, associations and resources that are already available, out there, the BC, Water Wastewater Association, support for small water services, and then Thompson Rivers University, small water, systems group as well. Within the report, I do outline what the regional district in Nanaimo has been doing since around 2009 with their water purveyors working group, and learned from those staff members that water purveyors working group that had direct contact with small water systems within the RDN did dial that project, that aspect of the program back when these other resources, BCWWA, started to flourish and get more traction. So that is the intention here, is to amplify and leverage our voice as a regional district and the water group to direct those inquiries to those already available resources for the most part.
And CEO,
And through the chair, just to Director Graham's question on, is this the best use of time when we've just lifted the moratorium? I think it is. The reason being that increasing these supports will help systems be more viable on their own and not have the requirement to apply to the regional district for that support to actually take them on. So the more work we can do here, I think it complements that lifting of the moratorium quite well. Yeah.
Further, Director Graham? Oh, I see a thumbs up.
Point of order, please. What is the motion?
Okay, the motion
That
is
which is
what is on the
or
agenda.
that which is in the report?
So in the report, there is the same motion, but it's labeled option two, I believe. So the motion on the floor on the table right now is the Water Services Committee staff, direct staff to further investigate expanded non-billable admin supports for non-RDCK on water and wastewater systems, including website enhancements, resources, blah, blah. And explore further potential viability of a billable program. So,
Thank you, because 4.0 is different.
So, I'll go to Weatherhead before me. Please go ahead, Director.
Thank you. Within this motion, should there be a wording around what we would cap this exploration at?
That was one of my questions, and I think that's what'll come up, like 5 hours free time and then you pay.
Yeah, like
Chris?
just wondering if we, don't know what it'll take.
Yeah, sorry, through the chair, just a bit of clarification on that. The cap would be per inquiry. Is that what you're?
Actually, just if you're investigating the expanded non-billing administrative, okay, maybe I've read it wrong.
You don't know.
No, yeah, through the chair, I think you're getting into specifics that will be included in what staff brings back.
Okay.
Yeah, and through the chair, we do need some clarity, particularly for Carly. This was originally in the Water Services Committee to come back to the Water Services Committee. You're now in a different committee.
Yeah.
And normally these minutes would go to board with a recommendation. So do you want this motion to read that the Rural Affairs Committee directs staff to further investigate, and then at the end of the motion, it would say, and bring a report back to the Water Services Committee?
Yes.
Because that would at least close that off so that this doesn't go to board tomorrow and confuse things, and it's the proper committee directing that.
Almost touched on that at agenda prep, but didn't
Yeah.
quite close that. So we're gonna add the words.
I take that as yes, I'll add the words
Friendly
friendly amendment, but I do want to note that I think it's really important, and I know when we created the Water Services Committee, that Director Davidoff was to receive the invitations to those committees, because even though he didn't have a water system, we knew we were going to get into this conversation. So I think it's important that this, going back to Water Services, it's really critical that Director Davidoff gets the invitations and information on those meetings.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna double check one, so we're gonna change it to RAC. And bring it back to report to. If anybody wants that read, it's what Stuart said. The Biz Committee recommend the words in the Chris's words and bring back to the Water Services Committee. And invitation is a good point to consider. Director Newell has maybe noted that.
And David Opp has this.
He's been invited. That was the first order of business I did as chair.
Oh,
And then let's go to Director David Opp. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
Okay, that's it. And Director Vandenberg.
Great, well, you can come as long as you, show up and, we're happy to have you.
I was worried
Hold
about
it back.
coming. I was worried about coming because somehow Ariel could end up paying for a whole bunch of stuff. That was why it kind of
That's kind of where I was gonna go, but I thought I'd leave it alone. And so my only comment is I'm glad that the CAO did, and I agree with that, based on Cheryl's question, that the moratorium is, and the ability for systems to come to the RDCK to take them over is a separate than to this. And I do agree that this offers the opportunity for the smaller systems who don't have a lot of resource capacity to look to RDCK for assistance along there. And I do agree with the period of time which is non-billable, but those resources could carry into a billable revenue opportunity for them. And down the road, this could be significant for those smaller systems to know that they have these resources available. So it's, I think it's a good direction.
I think it's unavoidable. You're gonna be spending this time, might as well capture it with a limit and maybe a dollar amount when you go over that limit. People will have their eyes wide open. Okay, so seeing no further discussion on that recommendation as amended, friendly amended, Director Dumas, is this good for Councillor Dumas? Everything good with you? We're not tapping Creston was the message to make sure you can take that back to council. Okay. All in favor? Any opposed? So a little bit of unique two-step here to have one committee help the other one out. There was another item we didn't get to that I captured here. That was the acquisition update progress report, which we did not want to refer here. But I think if you have the other report on how much time you're already spending on this acquisition, they will dovetail nicely next time you report to the Water Services Committee. So thanks very much, Chris. Great, we can move to one more item on the open. We have Community Works application, Tagum Beach Regional Park improvement upgrades, looking for $100,000 contribution dispersed from Community Works, split 75-25 F and E and F. So move Newell, you have a second, perhaps Graham, discussion. See your hand up, no discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Actually, now I'm recalling just where those parcels are. There's buildings that aren't on our land. They're on leased areas. Hopefully staff will sort out the eligibility of spending money on areas that are under a license of occupation and or a lease with tech. That's a detail we can deal with. Public time. It is 11:39. We have our one member of the public in the room has left us a few minutes back. Online, are there any questions of this committee by the public, from anyone online? If you have a question, it will just take a minute here. If you have a question, please unmute. And just pausing to make sure people have time. So seeing none, there are no questions from the public. So I'd entertain a motion to close the meeting to the public. Moved and seconded, all in favor? Motion to recess and reconvene in camera. Popoff and Newell, moved and seconded, all in favor?
Yeah, Chair, I have to move upstairs. I have to move my computer because I have to make sure it's confidential. Thanks.
Okay, we'll let Carly